and immune health. They actually all start in the same spot. And I just want to start with a story, two stories eventually, but what my personal experience is about bone health and immune health. When my son was born, he was born with cerebral palsy. And if you know anything about cerebral palsy, the bones are, excuse me, the muscles are spastic, and so it pulls bone. As my son was growing, the bones are softer, and I was taught that bones manipulate, excuse me, muscle manipulates bone. But I remember first time I went to a chiropractor, he said no, bones manipulate muscle. So we had to do a lot of work with my son. It was 2 hours a day, every day. I'm just going to give you a little tidbit. But most of us have seen what cerebral palsy can look like. My whole goal was that we could, get him to be as independent as possible and not have that fisting, the curvature, um, the spasticity in the legs. We cannot stop the spasticity. But what a neurosurgeon told me who had a son with cerebral palsy was, um, first of all, he said, if you can, do the best you can not to allow your son to see another child with cerebral palsy, because they get into their head that this is what I'm supposed to look like, and it can interfere with the treatment. And so my son, as far as we know, he didn't see anybody until he was probably about, it seems like he was about eighth grade. What are you about? 13. Yeah, about 13 there. And it was in a movie, and he said, Mom, is that what I have? And by that point, he was pretty straight. You can kind of see he looks, this is him. Oh, sorry, the big guy. He's 6'6". He was a preemie. You can see a little bit in the hand. See how it's slightly uh, fisting. Yeah, yeah. You can see a little bit in the hand. Most people don't even pick it up. This is my son in love. My daughter is in labor as we speak. Yeah. Yay! This will be our first. Anyway, just wanted to show you that's my beginning with the understanding about bone and muscle. Fast forward 25 years, mid 50s for me, and I'm a veteran, and I walk into the VA for my appointment, and they said, "Hey, uh, your next appointment is going to need to be hematology." I said, "What? What for?" Well, your blood levels are so low that you're likely to be your blood will be poisoned, because if this were a petri dish and we swipe it across the room, set it down, 24 hours later we got all kinds of growth on there, right? Your immune system, those fighters, they keep that stuff from invading us, right? And my labs were so low. If I remember correctly, it was 1.2 or 1.3, and the very next step was going to be hematology. I said, well, what can I do about it? There's nothing you can do. So I knew that's what they told me about my son with cerebral palsy. So I went back, just started looking. God started just putting people right in my path that helped me really start to dig into, well, where's the blood made, and how do I improve, because I was so low in those neutrophils, basophils. I can't quite remember all of them, but there were 3 or 4. And I'd already had a potential leukemia scare when I was serving in the military. If you know anything about the water in Camp Lejeune, that's one of the things listed is leukemia, which is, and there was more than one blood condition there. So anyway, they said, nothing you can do. Well, I came across a pathologist who knew a lot about tissue and started asking questions. Here's what I have. What can I do? And I learned that you can actually improve the number of those red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And remember, they're actually made in the bone. Well, part of when I went through this whole process, I was actually had the osteopenia and a little bit of osteoporosis. So when you have things like that, the osteoporosis, what happens within the bone with osteoporosis is the bone actually gets thicker, but it's less dense, because what it's trying to do, it's trying to actually still build bone. It's kind of like, imagine if this room, the four walls, were the inside of, I don't have a bone anymore because I gave it away, the inside of your bone. And it's right there at the epiphysis where things are made. What happens is the body is putting up bone. Now, there's not enough of the hardening agents, which we're going to talk about those. So I basically have, imagine 6 foot of scaffolding on all four walls. That greatly decreases the space, the usable space in this room, doesn't it? Well, that's what happens in the bone. So now it's very difficult for the body to produce more red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. I just want to make sure everybody's following me. Yeah. Is that the first time you heard that? That was the first time I had heard it. Did you know that? Yeah. So, what is osteoporosis? What does bone health have to do with immune health? Well, if I don't have enough of that army, and that's your Department of Defense, your immune system is your Department of Defense. It's your Army, your Navy, special forces come right here through the thymus, um, the Marines, the Coast Guard. It's all of them, and they each have a very specific job to do, right? So if they're low, there are some things that people believe they can do to improve the immune system. But in my personal opinion, what I see happens is, if I need more troops, that's going to improve my immune system, right? If you give me a shield, to fend off the enemy, but I don't have any more troops left, that's not really improving my health. It's allowing me to sustain a little longer, right? And that shield might be something like, a lot of us have been through illness. What are some of the things that you grab for, you've heard people grab for? Any ideas? Vitamin C. Uh-huh. Zinc. Zinc's a good one. Anything else? And just some products might be airborne or emergency. Now, while those are giving me a shield, my cells a shield, they're not actually bringing in any more cells. And cells are dying off rapidly. So the way I saw it was, just like when I was in the military, I want more troops. I don't want to be alone. Yeah, I've got plenty of gunpowder or shielding, but I can only last so long. Does that make sense? So that's how your bone health has a direct impact on your immune health. Because if there's so much scaffolding, and that scaffolding actually in the bone, what it'll do is the body keeps laying down. Remember, I said it gets thicker? It keeps laying down cartilage. It's trying to replace the bone, but because I'm missing calcium and other minerals, calcium is never alone, and other minerals, it's your hardening agents, so to speak. It can't help. And that's just in the bone. Calcium is 2% of your body weight. So if I'm weighing at 100 pounds, 2% of that is calcium. And then, when we have an urn after somebody's passed, those are between 8 and 12 pounds. All of that is minerals, all of it, every little bit of it. So that's a lot of body weight. That's a lot of minerals in our body, isn't it? Minerals, in my opinion, are the number one thing that we're missing in our food. So you've got to know that because of that, and I'm not the only, it's not just my opinion, it does show factually, but I am of the opinion that we need to supplement on top of our food because our food just doesn't have the same mineral content that it once did. Okay. So now, any questions about that before I move on to bone? Or what this, okay, excellent. Now, sometimes people say, Yvonne, that was a very academic class. You guys have heard a lot of the stuff about bones. My goal here is that you're going to be able, when you go pick a product or when you're talking to somebody about your bone health or your immune health, you're going to have some tools, and these all of these classes build on each other, but you're going to have some tools and you'll be able to go back to them and go, wait a minute, where does this play into? Because I try to teach you how each of them builds on the next. Okay. So now what I want to do is utilizing this chart. Um, Again, calcium, most abundant in the body. And here are some of the general requirements of calcium: 1,200 milligrams to up to 5,000 milligrams of calcium, depending upon what your health challenges are. Your ortho doctor would give you, if you came in with osteoporosis, usually something pushing the 5,000 milligrams of calcium. There is one out there. I'm going to try not to get too much into it, but it's pretty well known. Fosamax. Fosamax is a calcium supplement that has been removed. It has been rebranded and it is back out there under a different name. Now, it has a mechanism. All of these drugs work on a mechanism that shuts something down so that you don't have a symptom. Okay. So if I shut a symptom down, is there any way to rebuild that? Not, right? If I shut a symptom down, we're not actually rebuilding. It's just kind of like if you put a Band-Aid, your warning light comes on in your car and you put a Band-Aid on it, right? Okay, I don't see it, so it's not there. I don't feel it, so it's not happening. What I want you to realize, it's still happening. The degradation is still occurring. The tissue is still wearing, thinning, again, degrading. Okay. In our previous classes, we talked about the 4 basic tissue types, and that is connective tissue, muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, and nerve tissue. 80% of all conditions fall under those. So if you begin to understand, how do I help myself if I have a muscle tissue issue? And then what happens is several of those, like bone, is muscle and connective tissue. You'll be able to begin to help yourself. So we got 2%. I'm going to actually come to this side first. Over here, we look at what are some of the things needed for or with the calcium. Calcium is never alone. No mineral is ever alone. And a reminder, no vitamin can do anything without a mineral, period. Minerals are the carriers. And the cool thing about minerals is they also actually help the body detoxify. Okay, so they're going to start to pull that sludge out. And I don't know about you, but God said, from the ground I drew you, to the ground you shall go. I think when technology catches up, all these minerals, and we know to date something like half of the microbiome in our soil is actually in us. Isn't that? I just think that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, so calcium, some of the entourage. Now it needs all the minerals, but these are some of the major players. First of all is sun and vitamin D. That's just for absorption and to help you digest. Because if you don't digest what you're putting in, it doesn't matter how good it is, it can't get not just into the blood the bloodstream, but you got to be able to get it into the tissue, the heart tissue, the lung tissue, the muscle tissue. Does that make sense? So some of these uh, things, they can say, yep, it's in your bloodstream, but you want to make sure it's getting into the actual other tissues. The next thing would be strontium and silica. And in your notes, you can read a little bit more about those, but we find that strontium, when you're talking about especially the a little bit of the electrical system of the body, you know that we are also not just chemical but electrical. We're spiritual, we're emotional, right? We have other systems in the body that we can work on to either make ourselves well, or those systems can also make ourselves ill. Do you know anybody that has they think or talk themselves ill? Right? We know somebody like that, right? They're not really, well, that's how powerful the brain is. And, even Christ said to his disciples on these miracles, you could do this and even greater if you just believed, you know. Eh, Although, with every other commercial on TV being about, do you have these symptoms? Get this drug. Your body's not asking for that drug. And if you look back, everything used to be lined up directly to a nutritional deficiency. And in our first class, I told you about the NIH states that take out accidents, 8 out of 10 deaths are from a nutritional deficiency. So nutrients really do matter. And the size of them matters, the amount for you, your body weight, your challenges, any medications you're taking, because medications will block absorption. So silica, that's good with your calcium for heart health. It reduces the risk of hardening of the arteries. It helps lower the cholesterol. It also controls inflammation in the body. Anybody ever been told that you have systemic inflammation? Um, and then with low calcium, that does affect the immune health, the bone marrow. Again, I talked about that. Can't make more red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Sulfur, also known as MSM, that helps with that hemoglobin, wound healing. You want thicker hair, MSM is great for that. Nails, just go look on YouTube and MSM. You're going to be floored. But it also helps with cartilage, ligament, and tendon. So again, these minerals all work together. And then when we look at this side, we got boron, protein. If you have low magnesium, the calcium can actually cause calcification in the arteries. Remember, they work together. Confusion, and then there could be some soft tissue issues that go on as well. The organs and the muscles require calcium. Now, the tough thing is let's say your doctor says, oh, there's plenty of calcium in your bloodstream, but yet you have osteoporosis. So you don't need more calcium. And let's just say, anybody know somebody that has had hyper or hypothyroid? Yeah. So what happens with that, there's actually a connection with your endocrine system, and I don't think I read about it, but it's in here somewhere. Proper endocrine, boron, that's just one of them. Your parathyroid, which sits behind your thyroid, will go in and leach calcium from the bones to try to bring it to a more vital organ. Our muscle skeletal is secondary. If you remember, when somebody goes in shock, everything gets constricted to the legs and the arms because the body is trying to protect the vital organs. So you're told you have osteopenia, osteoporosis, but there's plenty of calcium in your bloodstream. I want you to ask yourself the question, or they may even say it's too high. Why do I have too much calcium? One of two things are happening. You're either getting enough, but you're not absorbing it. So that could be the sun, vitamin D. There's a couple things that are in play here, um, or the body's leaching it to take it to another vital organ. And we do forget our muscles need calcium. If you know anybody that has muscle cramps, twitching, restless leg, all of those have a direct association to calcium and the other minerals. And please know, when I say calcium, it's not calcium alone. It will be the minerals as well, because they work together. Any questions on that? Does that make some sense? Do you feel like, oh, if I take calcium, I have some ideas? And I will tell you, I am a coffee drinker. Any coffee drinkers in here? I enjoy coffee, the smell of it, but let me just tell you that much past 1 to 2 cups of coffee, I'm going to encourage you to go to decaf, because that caffeine will draw. Remember, it's a diuretic, so it'll draw those minerals out. When I was a sailor, we sat around and we drank coffee all day long. And I don't know if you do that, or a lot of times I enjoy a little coffee, iced coffee in the afternoon. I just encourage you, if you've already had one, not more than two, switch it up. Go to caffeine. And if you're doing coffee or something like that, it's a caffeinated drink for the energy, let's talk about that. Let's find you something, or the reason maybe why you're low on energy. Okay. But don't pull out any more minerals than you need to. All right. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, unless somebody has a question here. You all good? So this one is going to be, I think, of even greater importance than that first one. While there's a lot of good information on that first one, a lot of you probably know that, right? You know that minerals don't work alone. This one here, though, a lot of people aren't thinking about this. It's not right on top of your mind. There are numerous forms available of minerals, and I'm going to just I've listed a few here that are pretty standard if you go to buy nutrients. Okay, so you'll see some of these in your the bottles. And what I want you to understand is how much of this is actually getting into my body. That's what this side's going to be about. Okay, so there's 3 types of minerals. Well, there's numerous forms to create a mineral. Your metallic mineral is literally the rock that comes from the ground. Okay, that's going to be eggshells, limestone, seabed, sea salts. All right, clays, calcium carbonate. These literally are rocks, and so our body can absorb about 10%, 10 to 15%. All right, metallic minerals are the least absorbable in the body. Calcium carbonate, if you took 1,000 milligram tablet, about 400 of it will be available to be absorbed. Does that make sense? We've got a couple other calcium citrate, lactate, glutamate, cow's milk. So this kind of gives you a range of how much am I actually going to get. So if you were given cow's milk in a pill form, and it said there's 1,000 milligrams of calcium here, your body could absorb about 10% of it. Now let's go to the other side. So again, this is all about metallic, and this is 95% of the shelf in any store. All right. So if you haven't been in any of my classes, anytime I talk about a nutrient, it's going to be a whole food supplement type of a source. Okay. So the next one is called chelate or chelated minerals. Now, this they started doing, and I'm not quite sure, maybe it was in the 40s. They take an amino acid protein and then they wrap it around a metallic and it's better absorbed. Look at the jump. It went from 10 to 15 to as much as 50%. And there's lots of products out there that are chelated. And sometimes it's all you can find. So between the two, what would you say is the better option? Yes. Yeah, the chelate.
Or take a bunch of the other one.
Well, and that's really important to know. If you did that, you would have to take more for the body to actually be able to accept it. Okay. And then there's something called colloidal. So colloidal means that it is suspended in a matter in nanoparts, and they're equal and they don't move, they don't separate. And to be a true colloidal, it has to be actually smaller than the blood cell. So if you've got something that's smaller than the blood cell, do you think it's likely to get into the tissue also? Much more easily. Now you can't just take one nutrient. You can't, here's your D, here's your calcium, here's your A. Every single nutrient, a vitamin comes from the sun, just a reminder. Minerals come from the soil. Together, they make things like CoQ10. They make compounds. And a lot of times people are taking the compounds. I say, let's get those minimum nutrients in you, and there's nearly 100 of them, and see what your body can do with that. But back to this. It needs to be chelated. The nanoparticle needs to be smaller than the blood cell, and by a lot. And here's what's interesting. That would be food sources. So you can get supplementation with food sources. And if they're in a colloidal form, they're going to be even better. Not all of them are colloidal. They're just powdered. They're either freeze dried, and I would prefer you do a freeze dried over something that didn't say freeze dried, because vitamins, if over, I think it's 120, 25 heated, actually lose a lot of their properties. Minerals, you can burn them up. They're still going to be there. If you remember, anybody here used to take their wood ash and put it in their garden. That was how you actually fertilize a garden. Because remember, all that wood ash, all that is minerals. And it's just literally a repeat. The cycle repeats. God knew what he was doing. And he said, to the ground you shall go. We go back in the ground, we fertilize the soil. Our animals go on the ground, they fertilize the soil. It's actually a pretty cool process. Some words I want you to be aware of are humic shale. Anybody ever heard that word before? So humic shale, to actually be called humic shale, it's supposed to be millions of years old. It's plants. It's plants that are deep into the soil, and they never fossilized for one reason or another. There's tons of natural plant beds here in the United States and literally throughout the world. But Utah is one of them. Utah has lots of, And I'm not necessarily talking, well, some would say seabeds, but along that seabed was vegetation. So that would be the plant. The seabed would be more this rock that we talked about in its natural form. Follow me?
So when we were kids and we ate mud pies, that was good for us?
Well, it certainly could have been. It depends upon what was. Yeah. Now, I will tell you, has anybody heard of pica or cribbing? So that's when, as like you might have a child who eats glue, who picks paint and eats it, babies that bite on the crib, your animals that bite on the toolbox or the fencing. They're actually looking for minerals. That's pica or cribbing is another name. And what? Absolutely, yeah, yeah. A lot of animals do that, and it is that's why they set out a salt lick. Because a salt lick offers the minerals, and they'll take 3 or 4 licks, whatever they need, and then they're on their way. And they begin to recognize, a good farmer knows set out your salt lick so that my animals are getting fed. My brother-in-law works in Canada. He's a professor at the Canada University up there, and he works with the moose. And one of their big problems there has been the moose, the elk, they get in the way of the vehicles and people die. And they're coming to the roadways because after snow, they use salt. The vegetation is losing its mineral content. So they're moving closer and closer. So they've been trying to find ways, outside of blocking them off. How do we remineralize and get these animals to stay away from the roadways? And that's just not here. It happens in many of those other cold states as well. A lot of them have that problem. So again, humic shale. And then humic shale also has with it something called fulvic acid. Literally, when they're manufactured, it's 2 in 1. But there'll be companies that'll offer you fulvic acid and humic shale. If you ever see that option, go for the humic shale. It's going to have more per dose. All right. It's a marketing ploy. They separate it. Here's some oh, yep, you want both? You get both. They just sold you 2 products. It really was one, and they divided it. They separated it. Okay. And again, what to be called humic shale, uh, it's a mineral-rich layer of the earth that comes from plants that lived millions of years ago. There are companies out there, they'll tell you, and I think it has to be something like they have to dig further than 7 or 10 feet. And there are companies out there that, oh, that one's broken. Yeah, that's why she's got them up. Yeah, you can kind of sort of see. So we were suggested to leave them. I know. Sorry about that. Um, any questions on minerals, types, how you could best choose? Does anybody maybe know what's in their minerals now? Do you recognize any of these names? Yeah. This last one down here, um, when you have bone spurs or stones, gallbladder, kidney, bunions, sometimes you'll be told that, oh, you have too much calcium. we're taught that it's not too much calcium. The body's trying to bring calcium, if it's a bunion, to an area where the tendon is, and it's trying to repair that. It's a stress point. And so, first, what happens is you get inflammation. And sometimes they'll say, oh, your shoes are too tight. Well, anybody ever have that or heard of it? And my shoes are fine. It could just be that you're losing nutrient density to that area and the body's trying to bring it. A spur would actually be on the bone itself. So the body, anybody know about the Dowager's hump? Do you remember that? The widow's hump? Today they call it tech neck for technology. You know, we're either sitting down like this or we've got our phones like this, you know. So today they actually call this tech neck, and we see it in sixth graders. We're starting to see it in third graders. Two things are occurring here. You're not just, your body's not in an, some would say ergonomically correct position. But we're also, think about the food source that our average sixth grader is eating today. It's in a package. It's not live food. And many of them aren't receiving or getting additional nutrients. So it's happening faster. Does that make sense? When a plant, way back in the day, before we were putting pesticides on the plant, if you lay down a good minerally loaded soil, it doesn't need a pesticide, an herbicide, a fungicide. But what was happening is, as our commercial lands, and how many know we've been trying to feed other nations for years, haven't we? I think ultimately to our own detriment, right? So minerals are not just laid out in a uniform blanket. They're in the soil, but they're in veins. And when those are used up, they're used up. Now, before we started damming everything, the water would rush down into these farms. And does anybody remember that little silt that would kind of layer on top? That was the minerals. And the farmer would churn those in. That was the replacement of minerals. We don't do that anymore. So, I would encourage you start your own, or, maybe help out the the um, uh, the food bank and get them some really good soil fertilizer.
Or at the Grange, we have a community garden
There,
managed, and so we have 48 raised beds over there.
fantastic.
Water to each bed, so you can come over. Not that expensive.
I love it. Yeah, and let's get her some really good nutrients for the soil. Um, but this is partly why we are seeing so much illness in America. And in the earlier class, they kind of got on the topic a little bit of, various diseases and cancers. But think about this. If the minerals are missing, because this is the same for us, here's what I want you to see, the connection. If the plant doesn't have the minerals, plant cannot manufacture its own, it's got to draw it up. Plenty of sun, right? But not enough minerals. So now they're susceptible to pests. They're more susceptible. So what do? We utilize pesticides. I don't think we realized at first what was happening. And then slowly, now fungus is starting to take over. So we start adding fungicides along with the pesticides. And then eventually it's herbicides. The same thing happens with us. Because we're not getting the nutrient density we once did, we're sicker faster. We're sicker longer. I want you to know for this particular one with bones and the immune health, if you can get that right, if you can get that improved, you'll have less sickness. What I mean, I shouldn't say that because I do not believe health means the absence of sickness. I don't believe that. To me, health is the recovery when you do get sick. Okay, you can catch a cold. Sometimes we cannot, um, control that virus, that fungus, that bacteria. But how well the body can manage, to me, that is about, that's a measurement of your health. How many of us look healthy? We appear to be the right weight. We appear to have, hair. And then, boy, something hits us and we are down, down, down. Okay. To me, that is good. That's better health than just looking. I'm going to break just a quick moment. A lot of people ask me about recipes. My motto used to be life's too short, eat dessert first. When you begin to change up the things that you're doing, it can be hard. So, one of the things, because life was short and I ate dessert first, I started with some of those areas in recipes, utilizing nutrition to improve. Hey, how can I get something that I enjoy, but make it purposeful? Make it feel, I now ask myself, whatever I'm putting in this pie hole here, will this bring me wellness or will this bring me illness? Is this going to bring me life to my body or is this going to drag me down? We know those things, but sometimes we got to ask them, and I make the decision. So Kathy's going to serve you two things that I made, and you're going to recognize these things, but we just kind of added some minerals to them. One, they're tasty, but now they're purposeful. So whether you make your own yogurt, go ahead. I've got some yogurt. It's a lemon chiffon, and we call them collagen gelatin blocks. So collagen and gelatin are necessary for bone. Oh no, she can have her own. There should, and if you run out here, there are some more in the refrigerator. Yeah, you should get two of each.
We don't have enough of the.
They're in there.
Oh, there's more in there.
There's more in there. Yep.
It's okay. I'll drop these.
So this is yogurt. Now, for some of you that do make your own yogurt, even better. I don't. So this is a plain yogurt. It's a plain Greek yogurt. So there's no sugars in it, no added sugars. And then what I did is I added some calcium and minerals and some essential oil. This one happens to be lemon. Eat the yogurt first because it's got that sour before you eat the gelatin block. But it's just a yummy, and you're getting a little bit of protein. If you want a dessert at night, I got ways you can make chocolate mousse, hot chocolate, some things that will actually feed the body. You get a little bit of that satiation. You feel like I got a good thing in me, but it's literally going to help. Guys, sometimes I'm so purposeful, it drives my family nuts. And I try not to be. But you know what? When you start to feel better, I don't want that stuff anymore. And let me tell you what else happened. When we started nutrifying, my cupboards are no longer like they once were. I had boxes and packages and cans, and I think like many, many of us did or do, you'll find that your body's satiated and the live food, mostly the live food, your refrigerator will be more full than with condiments, but with real live foods. You'll find that your cravings decrease, which will change what your cupboards look like. And that ultimately will change how you feel.
Are you going to share the recipe?
Yeah, and because I
It's
like
delicious.
this.
Yeah, I normally don't
And
like
the
Greek
essence.
yogurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I can certainly. I realized I didn't pull out the Greek yogurt, but it was Strauss's, I think it's called, and it's just plain Greek yogurt. And in the very large one, which is it's about this large, um, I did. It was probably about 15 drops of the lemon, and then I have this calcium right here that I really like. It's got a vanilla flavor to it, but it's calcium and minerals. And so I added a capful, excuse me, 2 capfuls for the whole thing. And then if you enjoy those gelatin blocks, that has collagen. How many of you have a plain collagen you might put in your drink? Yeah. While the gelatin, the Knox, I just use this one. While this is hot, I mix in my collagen. So now I have collagen and gelatin. Okay. And you can use like anybody have any of these types of packages that have, you pour in your water. It's a flavor you like this one is pineapple. I didn't make pineapple, but I like pineapple. um, yeah, whatever kind. And on this one I put in, and it's called Rebound, if you know that, but it's a sports drink that has over 80 minerals, plus it had amino acids in it. And then I added the orange oil also. So again, the Jello blocks, I make this in the 9x13. I'll make two. A lot of times I make a lime one and a orange because that's favorites of mine. Put them in a container. I slice them up like this. And for a week, my husband and I will just kind of come along and pop it. I had to learn how to get more gelatin, collagen, calcium in my body without just taking a nutrient. So I've been very, purposeful to make things.
Is there an essential oil that is called an essential oil, but it wouldn't be applicable to add to something you're going to eat? Or is an essential oil basically an orange, because that's what, makes us taste the orange essence, okay,
Yeah.
mixed with an oil that's bio-accessible?
So if I understand your question, there are orange extract. You could use orange extract.
Okay.
Orange oil would be, I use the essential oils for both medicinal purposes, um, as well as, ingesting them. There are some companies that say do not ingest this oil. Some are okay to do that. And if you don't want to spend the money for an oil, if you don't know, do an extract. This with the almond, if you like almond, with an almond extract, and I would add a little bit of heavy cream into your gelatin blocks. OMG, it's delicious. Yeah, and you could even take your yogurt, add a little bit of your minerals, and then again, I really like almond. Do some almond as well. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I just didn't want someone to go out and just automatically dump essential oils they might have been using in a diffuser.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
You know what
Thank
I'm
you.
saying?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And so again, you don't have to use an essential oil. That's just what I did today. Yeah. And again, make sure that your oil is ingestible. If not, use the extracts. If anybody knows the company Watkins, they've been around for 100 and something years. I had no idea they had so many
Don't
things.
those have an alcoholic base though?
Yes, most of them do.
Okay,
You
so
are
if you're an
correct.
alcoholic, you wouldn't want to put the extra.
I haven't studied that, but that would make sense to me.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, and then there's pure extracts, and then there's imitations. So I think the imitation may not have the alcohol base, but do check.
Yeah, question. Maybe I should just read the box, but I have the same box at home. But how many
Packets?
Packets. Yeah, thank you. Of gelatin do you put? Say if you're doing it with the collagen, how much collagen do you put in too.
So I can write down the recipe for you, but I'll just tell you briefly.
Yes.
In my 9 by 13 pan,
Yes.
I actually did 6 of the gelatin.
Oh, okay.
I did 2 servings. I have one of a plain mineral, and the top, that little white, was one of these, one serving for the whole.
One of that and
Yeah,
two. Oh.
yeah. And then I did 1 scoop of the collagen. And you can certainly do more. This is just what works for me. And again, just being very purposeful about um, what I'm eating and the fact that I get to enjoy something. And somebody asked me, can you use Jello, gelatin? While I no longer use that, do whatever is easy for you to begin with. Just start doing it. It becomes a habit, right? And I know here when we do these classes, we've got a lot of people that are just getting into the things that are in our foods that they don't want them to be. I'm just going to say, let's start to nutrify your body so you can feel good, so that you can begin to care about that other stuff, right? And I do care about it, but it can take a little bit out of you. It can get confusing too. I remember days being on the floor just crying out to God, Lord, I'm trying to do my best. And now I find out, I remember when oatmeal was like, no oatmeal. And when you see the list of our oatmeal and what we do with it, it was like, so any questions about the forms of minerals, the different forms that we just covered? Do you feel like that can help you make a better choice when you go start to look? Please know 90+% of what's on the shelf, you'll see a lot of these names. So it's about learning how to make a better choice. If you have more money than time, obviously the colloidals are going to be a little more pricey because there's food. Any of these food supplement, whole food supplements, they just are more expensive. They're not mass produced. A lot of them are smaller companies. There's other factors, but if you have more time, maybe you just recognize, okay, I might have to take this a little longer, but this is what I can afford right now. And if you can only do one thing, I'm going to encourage you: minerals, minerals, minerals. Okay, 600 milligrams or more if you can find something like that. And a lot of them, they're out there. They're at 14 milligrams. So keep looking. You'll find something that's in the hundreds. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one.
Quick question.
Yes.
Okay. On the right-hand side of the chart, you have minerals that you can go out and buy. They're cheap because there's nothing to them, and that's why they're out there on the shelf.
And they're rock. Yeah.
Right, and they're rock. But if you take it religiously, if you're only getting 10%, will that fulfill most dietary needs for those specific minerals?
I'm gonna go out on it. I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
And the reason is, I'm always coming at this looking for, how do I rebuild the tissue? We are aging, period. So this may be enough to sustain you for the day, not maintain your current status, just sustain you to survive. I personally am looking to not just maintain my current status either. I am personally trying to rebuild the tissue that I know, and I don't always know the reason why I'm broken down, but I surmise for my thing, it could be the chemical exposure, but I also do a lot of detoxing. So I do know that I'm a lot better than I once was. But did that answer your question?
Well, I'm thinking that someone who actually cannot go out and super shop for the stuff that's on the right-hand side, don't throw away the stuff that you've already bought on the left-hand side, because anything that's going to help, okay, would be fine. The idea is that some of these can possibly be detrimental if you overtake them.
And that,
Vitamins,
yeah.
especially that are fat soluble.
Yeah, and there is a piece to that because sometimes it's what they're putting in with
Right.
the nutrient that can be harmful. Again, that's why for me, I will be talking about whole foods and preferably liquid. I specialize in liquid. Most of us have poor gut health, whether it's the upper GI or the lower GI. Maybe you can't digest it, maybe you can't absorb it. And so I'm just trying to help you get the best that you can get in you. Okay. And then,
Thank you.
yes. And then this last one, this one right here, and I'm going to pass this around in a moment, but I just want to show you when this comes around. There are books out there. We know when you're deficient in this nutrient, here are the symptoms, and some of these literally are considered diseases that you're going to get. So if you know that a nutrient can turn around limb numbness, cramping, spasms, twitches, nervousness, osteoporosis, kyphosis, panic attacks, PMS, tooth decay, webbed toes or feet, even frizzy hair is in here. Lethargy. Anybody know somebody that falls asleep at the drop of a hat? Yeah. Yeah. I had a lady in here. She said, she'd be at a meeting with her CEO and just, and it's narcolepsy. And, she just started some nutrition. I said, it could be something as